Hey everyone, in this one I'm just going to be showing you guys the back of my camera and we'll just dive into the menu system and go through the whole button layout that I talked about in the first video. There's a couple of things I think I forgot to mention or maybe I explained wrong in the first video, so I'll try and correct that in this one. And if you have any questions, if I didn't explain anything well enough or anything like that, just let me know in the comments, send me an email or anything like that. And I apologize if some of you didn't get the first email. I'll include a link to it in the email, but I'm trying to sort that out with the company, what's going on with that. So, oh Jesus, hair is getting long. We're in lockdown and I haven't had access to a hairdresser for a long time. Hopefully soon. Anyways, I hope you guys are all well and hope you get on well with this and get something useful out of it.
Okay, so let's jump into how I've actually set up my camera, all my buttons and the dials. I'm not going to go over the custom settings in this one, but I'll show you how to set them up anyways and which buttons it is on. Anyways, let's start out with, from the top again, we'll just start out with the dials. And so as I mentioned, I kind of do it slightly differently, and I have it set up to be shutter speed and ISO primarily. So let's go into the menu, and we'll go into, B1, and down to dial function. And as I said, I'm usually in manual, so I've only set this one, but if you're usually in something else, then set that for yourself. So here I have set up the back one here to be shutter, and then the next one here, the front one, to be ISO. I don't really care about these bottom ones here because I use the lever for video, but you could change what the dials do by flipping this switch here, and that's when you would use these, set up these two down here as well. So now then, to actually get into how I change my f-stop, I have to set a button up, and that's also in B1, and button function. And button function here is usually where I set most of the things for this. So we go in here, and it's the first one here, and we just make sure that that is the exact same thing, exposure, exposure. And that means that, so you see here now, I'm changing the shutter speed here, ISO there, but if I press this button here, then I get to change my f-stop with the front dial, and shutter speed is still the same. So that works really well for me. But, try it out if you want to and give it a shot to see if it works for you. Okay, for the next one, let's go into back button focus. And I use AEL-AFL, kind of perfectly situated here. So to set that up, we need to just assign what this does, and we need to turn off focus from the shutter button. You don't want to, that's the whole thing about back button focus is that nothing happens when you half press this, or it can set your exposure, but it won't take it. So let's go in here to menu again, and button function, and we go down to find AEL-FL, and we just make sure that that's set to the same here again. So you go right and you find this here, AEL-AFL. Make sure that's pressed, and we go back. And then we have to set what the AEL is going to do and what the shutter button is going to do. So for that, we need to go into A1, and we go down to AEL-AFL. And if you're ever wondering what things do, there's a okay explanation if you press info here, and it'll come up a little box with what it does. It's not always the best because I guess they can't go into too much detail about what it does, but it's handy, if you just want to get a kind of quick reminder of what anything does. And AEL-AFL. And as I said, I'm usually in continuous autofocus, but every now and then I'll use single point focus, more if I'm using a wide angle and I'm just taking a different type of image really. And I've set all these to mode 3. And mode 3 for continuous autofocus here means that AEL-AFL will start my autofocus. If I press halfway on the shutter, I think that is getting the exposure, and if I fully press it, that is kind of taking the exposure, so taking the image. So that is the main part of it. So making sure that the back button is starting the autofocus. There is a couple of different modes here as well, but I'm not comfortable in knowing exactly what all these does. This one works for me, so I've set it to mode 3. And you got to make sure that halfway autofocus is inoperative, and that just means that this the shutter button here, when you half press that's not going to activate your autofocus. Okay, so as I mentioned in the video, I've set my ISO button here, and I've set that to be the autofocus limiter, which is really helpful for birds in flight. So for the buttons, again, it is B1, button function, ISO, make sure that is set to autofocus limiter. And if you haven't seen the video, then that is to do with basically what a lot of lenses can do. You set limits on what the autofocus does, but for this I've used it specifically for birds in flight, and we can go up here to A2, A3, AF limiter. So you see that that's off by default. We go in here, on, and I have it set. You can set 3 different settings here, but I like to just use 1. And you could just set that to something, this is the kind of thing you need to change on that day when you're photographing. So now I'm just setting it to a distance quite far away, but a lot of times some of the backgrounds can be very far away. So it just depends on the day. So I've set it to 250 here now, and I change that depending on the circumstances. And it just means that when we go back out here now, and I press the ISO button, you see here that comes up limit. And that means that I can't focus on anything that's further away than 250 meters. So what's also a good idea then is to maybe change this one here. You see there's a star on it there. It means I pressed record up here. That means I've added it to my menu. But that's something as well. We can go over that in a different video. Okay, next one is to set what this lever does. And we go for that. We go into B1 again, and we go down to FN lever function. And I have it set to mode 3 here so that I can go into shooting video if I flick this switch. And I just set this to FN then, so that it doesn't, because you can switch the power on off here if you want to, but I don't want to do that. Now, there's something I forgot in the last video, and that is the FN button there. And that is something I'm experimenting with as well. And I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, actually. Maybe I did, but I don't think I did. So basically, when I'm pressing this now, bracketing comes up here. So that just means that you can assign, if you go up here to this camera in 2, you can go into bracketing. And right now I have exposure bracketing on here, 5 frames with 1 stop in between each frame. That's also something I'm going to leave for a different video, but I just wanted to say that is what I'm using that button there for. And it's also something I'm testing out. I'm not actually, it's not something I'm using at the moment, but I'm kind of waiting for the opportunity to try it out, really. So I have it set up and it's ready to go, and it's the same thing. We go into B1, and we just go down to find FM button and choose BKT, bracketing mode. But it's a helpful button that's quite close, so you could use that for something more useful that you use more often. Okay, for the joystick, I think I also said something wrong here last time. So moving it about, pressing it, and then holding it and dialing it. But I had this on before, but then that was something I said it wrong, or I said it differently one day, and I couldn't remember how I said it. That's how easy it is to forget things. It's actually really good for me to do these videos and going through it with you guys, because teaching is the best way of learning. So it's really helping me refresh how everything works. So if we're going to B1 here, we're going to center button, that is this button here, and set that to AF area select. Now that means that I don't have to hold this thing in, I can just press it and then I can cycle through. So I'm cycling through with the front dial here, and it still does whatever else it still does the other things I said. You can move it about, press it, and it jumps back to the middle. But at least now all you have to do is press it and cycle through the different kind of focus points that you have available to you. Okay, so then moving on to these kind of up-down points around the OK. The OK is just set to going into the super control panel, so nothing you do about that. But setting these up and down, as I said, it's a kind of a limiting function actually. They're not, you can't set them, you don't have as many things available to you as for all these other buttons. So it's in here, and I've just let that set to direct. I've set that to direct function. It says that each arrow and button can be assigned a direct function when they are pressed while shooting. So I have that set. But as you see here, there's only these two. There's only right, there's only down. The other ones are just set to a default, and I don't really use them. The only one that was useful for me in this was this one here, and that is the shooting mode. So at the moment, I actually just changed the, because this one here was to ISO. You see here, there's not, everything isn't available. It's a very short list. So if you find anything in here that's useful for you, obviously, pick it. But for me, at the moment anyways, I'm not messing about with flash and all that now, so maybe one day when I do, maybe I'll change it to something like that. I just changed these, both of them, to do the same thing, and they just change my shooting mode. So I press that and I can go through, again, which ones I have available to me. And you might see that I've taken out a lot of them because I don't use them very often. Okay, so then we go on to the buttons and dials that are on the battery grip on the em1x. And again, it's B1 button function, and you just make sure that everything is set exactly as it was up top. So let's see here. Yeah, so here we start. That's the exposure one. I have this ISO set to AF limit, and I get this AEL AFL, meaning AF. You know what I mean. So everything's set the same, and leave it at that. And then we go down to the white balance button down here. I've changed that because I hardly ever change my white balance. That's just set to automatic, and I changed that in Lightroom. So we're going here to the button one again. Going down to white balance, and I've set it to custom function 2, which, if I remember correctly, that is Pro Capture. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this in another video because I don't want to make them too long and too detailed. So we'll just stick to the kind of surface of the button layout just now. Then we got card. Can't do anything about that one. Can't do anything about the trash or menu, so they all stay the same. I've changed this one up here because I like to have quicker access to, basically I have behind here, I can switch to that view. So this one here is also set to a custom mode. And if we go in here, button function, and then I set to custom mode 3. I think that was high res shooting. And let's see, then we got the front buttons here. And it's, again, button functions. This is such a useful one, this B1 button function, and just setting where you set most of the things. So then we just jump down to, here was the first one. That's the top one, so you can kind of see what it is here. I've set that to custom mode 1. And this one here I've changed to what that button is, which is showing me, basically displaying the viewfinder here on the screen. So that's the second one down. So just make sure you got that view selection there. And then the next ones are down here. So the third one down here I've set to zooming in. So basically you press the zoom button and then you dial with this one here to zoom in. And it is quite handy to use that every now and then, especially if you're not sure if you have focus. I've used it sometimes just to identify a bird because I don't know what I'm looking for. And it can zoom in really far and still give you a decent enough resolution to see what things are. And then we got the last one down there, and I've set that to be the, what is this one called again? Depth of field preview, that's what it's called. So that's useful to have. I didn't have that for a while, and I found myself missing it, so I added that. I have actually changed this to peak, but that's usually on all the time. And it's really handy if you're in manual focus every now and then to check what's in focus. I use that a lot for when I'm shooting video. And that is it. That is how I've set up the kind of the layout for my em1x. Now, I will be coming out with more videos and a few kind of tips and tricks on settings, and do give me a comment below if there's something you guys want to see, or send me an email or anything like that. If you're wondering about anything, I'll be happy to make some more videos for this. Hope you guys are well. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.